So I've already reviewed one Alex Kidd game a long time ago, so I figured now's a good time to check out another. So this time I played what was actually the first Alex Kidd game I've ever played, and this was on the Genesis collection I have on my PS3. The game is called Alex Kidd and the Enchanted Castle. And this was the lone Alex Kidd game on the Sega Genesis, as the rest of them were housed on the Sega Master System. Anyway, to recap, Alex Kidd was a character that was originally Sega's mascot before Sonic came along. Many of his games were straight platformers with a few other elements thrown in to keep things fresh. Most notable is the inclusion of the game Rock, Paper, Scissors, in this game called Jankin. It's all a bunch of bullshit because it's all luck-based and it forces you to play it many times. If you lose the game, you lose a life, making shitty cheap deaths all too common if you're an unlucky sort. Well, Jankin's back in the Enchanted Castle, a game where Alex learns that his father was alive on a planet named Paper Rock. Yeah, I know, that's really inventive. Anyway, Alex sets out to see if his father is truly alive. Of course, in his trek, everything is out to get him. I mean, shit, the first enemy you encounter is a freaking car that's heading your way. And just like every other game, he punches his foes. So that car that's coming towards you? Just punch it away. In addition to this attack, Alex has his jump kick attack. That's a great move. Well, when it works. The problem is that the jumping kick is sporadic, and you can't really rely on it. Too many times I've jumped at an enemy expecting to kick it out of existence, but then it never happens, so I'm the one that perishes. Sometimes when you jump, Alex kicks right away. And other times he'll go up and down just about an inch from the ground, he'll thrust out his leg. It's a bunch of random bullshit that can result in a bullshit death. Did I mention that this game is bullshit? Anyway, to move on, Alex also has an attack for lower enemies. When Alex ducks, he can crawl around and also do a crawling attack. Once again, this can cause problems. If you're near the edge of a platform and you punch, you better hope that you're not too close to the enemy, as the punching animation may cause Alex to touch an enemy, causing death. This seems to be a recurring thing, does it not? Perhaps this is because of the hit detection. Granted, it is slightly improved over Miracle World, but that's only because the controls aren't as loose. Since Alex still uses his fists as a weapon, you have to get way too close to many of the enemies. Okay, you get used to how far away you need to be to bash and grounded opponents, but anything that flies is a gamble due to the crappy jump kick. The big thing you need to remember about the fists is that you need to time it since there's a very slight delay before pressing B and when Alex actually attacks. Now, if the game was accurate and quick enough so that Alex did what you wanted when you pressed the commands, there wouldn't be any problems, so it may have lessened the frustration a tad bit. But as I think of it, the frustration really doesn't appear until much later in the game. Until you get there, the game is actually kind of boring. Unlike Miracle World, the enemies are fairly easy to defeat, and you can easily hop right over or walk on by most enemies without engaging them. There's also no skull blocks that immobilize you or death blocks where a midget Grim Reaper chases you, so that eliminates 2 past traps. But because of this, the game is actually kind of boring. Again, this changes about 3/4 of the way in, once you reach the mountain levels. There's 2 of them, and one can be bypassed quickly by staying on top of the stage. The second one is actually the second most infuriating, simply because you need to travel up vertically and it can be difficult to see what is dropping towards you. That's not what bugs me though. The part that sucks is that this stage afterwards is a pedicopter stage, and if you die here you go back to the mountain stage beforehand. This makes no sense though. Why in the world should I backtrack to the previous stage if I fail at this pedicopter stage, when that never happens any other time in the game? Why should this be a one-off situation? Is it because it's the shortest stage in the game? Utter fucking bullshit. Remember how Miracle World has shops every few stages? Well, in the Enchanted Castle, instead of these stores, you can enter buildings to play a game of Jankin. Basically, you wager a bit of your cash to play a game, and if you win, you earn the prize shown. If you lose, well, you get a nice painless death. Okay, not entirely painless, because an anvil drops on Alex's head, and then soon after the death animation plays out. I usually skip these games simply because to me, it just wasn't worth the risk of losing a life. Thankfully, the game does ease up a bit with continues too. Again, unlike Miracle World, which forced you to find the continue system that was strangely hidden in the game by sheer luck or walkthroughs, Enchanted Castle has the continue system that is much less hidden, although it's still not in plain view, like a game over, continue or quit screen. Instead, on the title screen, you need to access the options menu and then the continue option is in there. The game does force you to cough up $1,000 in order to continue, but honestly, this money is not hard to come by. In fact, most of the time I end up putting a profit on many of my playthrough attempts, simply because money is abundant. So let's go back a bit because I want to talk about the pedicopter. I thought it was simple to maneuver in Miracle World, but that changes slightly in Enchanted Castle. For one, it's actually a bit tighter to fly, which I can't really complain about. However, to dam that pedicopter, pressing button A to make it gain elevation is a trying affair. You practically need to rapidly mash the jump keys to make it go higher, since it barely gains any altitude when pressing it a single time. The best way to explain this is to compare it to Kickmaster's flying skill. You can mash the jump button all you want, but you barely make any progress. This is what the pedicopter in Enchanted Castle felt like. Thankfully, you're only really forced to use it in one stage, and every other time you want to use it, it's purely optional. Also, this stage is fairly easy if you just stick towards the top of the screen and move ahead cautiously. So now we move on to the final bit of the game that makes me hate it the most, the Enchanted Castle itself. This is where I give the game a huge middle finger, because it just takes the dullness of the first 90% of the game, then flips it around and at least make it a bit more entertaining, at the cost of being super challenging. It starts off easy enough, with a few toy soldiers just marching towards you. You'll see a couple of areas that look like traps, but they really aren't. Because of this, you might stick in one location like an ass until you figure out that it's not a trap at all. You do start getting the traps, but there's really nothing that will require a walkthrough. Well, I say that, but that's only because you reach this room here, which I would like to call the bumper room. All I can ask is, what the fuck was Sega thinking with this room? Granted, you can cheat here and use a pogo stick or pedicopter if you have one, but what if you don't? You have to start bouncing off the bumper blocks on the left and hope you get propelled into the room on the right. But here we roll back into the first problem I mentioned with the game. Well, alright, technically the second problem. It's the fucking jump kick. Maybe if it worked accurately like it frickin' should, this room wouldn't be the hardest in the fucking game. But of course not. Instead, this room could take you anywhere between 5 seconds to 5 fucking hours to complete it. Best of all, if you die in between here and the checkpoint at the Jankin room, you get to do it again. I actually almost quit at this part, but I toughed through it and thankfully was able to complete it. There's not much else to mention other than the final boss, the one and only King Jankin. Just like the other few bosses that there are, you need to battle him in Jankin, but you do need to face him 2 times in a row. Once you do that, he'll physically attack you. If you have a cape laying around, which grants you complete invulnerability, just use it, run up to Jankin the Great, and punch the shit out of him. Once that's done, his limbs expose and you're greeted to the ending. I'm not going to spoil it, because it's just too dumb to even bother to mention. I can't really talk too much about the graphics or sounds because they're really not that notable. They're usually pretty mediocre at best and not something you're really going to remember. Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle is, for the most part, just a game you can pass on. It's not something that's really fun to play, and the Jankin elements, although mostly skippable, are stupid for the simple reason that it's based on luck and wastes a life if you lose it. Games based on luck should not force you to die when you lose, because it's complete bullshit that can damage the game's fun factor. Instead, Alex should lose a ton of money and be allowed to continue on his quest. And then the fact that many enemies are best off being completely avoided instead of attacked, and you get a dry game that makes you scratch your head on why it's in a bunch of greatest hit collections. Final score? 5 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.